she almost didn't come. That's the part nobody tells you about reunions. The part that happens 3 days before, when you're standing in your closet staring at a dress you bought specifically for the occasion, and something deep inside your chest whispers, "Don't go." Naomi Bennett had heard that whisper. She had listened to it, argued with it, ignored it, and ultimately decided that 10 long years was long enough. 10 years was supposed to be enough time for people to grow up. Enough time for old wounds to heal, and for petty, insecure girls to finally become mature women. She was wrong. She had no idea that somewhere in this sprawling city, a powerful man she barely remembered was already on his way to change absolutely everything. But we'll get to him in just a moment. Before we unlock the rest of Naomi's incredible story and see exactly how the ultimate payback unfolds, take a quick second to give this video a thumbs up. If you love deep, emotional stories of hidden worth and unexpected justice, hit that subscribe button right now to help our channel grow and reach more people. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that kindness always finds its way back, and drop your thoughts in the comments down below as the story unfolds. We read every single one of them. Now, let's go inside that glittering ballroom. Picture this. A luxury hotel ballroom in downtown Atlanta, glittering brilliantly under the warm, heavy glow of crystal chandeliers. It's the kind of high-end venue that makes ordinary people feel extraordinary for exactly one evening. Soft jazz drifts effortlessly through the air. Champagne flutes catch the light like golden promises. Former classmates clad in expensive designer clothes are hugging each other just a little too tightly and laughing just a bit too loudly. They are performing a very specific, carefully curated version of happiness, one that the open bar is helping sell very convincingly. Naomi stood near the drinks table, completely alone. She was wearing that deep burgundy dress that stopped just below the knee, looking elegant in the unique way that only a woman who truly understood proportion, style, and design could pull off. Her natural hair was styled perfectly, her skin luminous, her posture beautifully composed. From the outside looking in, she looked like an elite woman who belonged anywhere she chose to stand in this world. From the inside, she was desperately counting down the minutes until she could gracefully escape. She scrolled through her phone, pretending to read something of immense importance. It's what people do at parties when they want to look incredibly busy instead of painfully lonely. She had already checked her emails twice. She had aimlessly liked 3 photos on Instagram that she hadn't actually looked at. Finally, she sent a quick voice note to her best friend, Camille, that said simply, "I made a mistake coming here. Call me in 45 minutes and fake a massive emergency." Camille had responded immediately, "Ever the loyal friend, I'm already ready. But give it an hour. You deserve to be seen." Naomi had smiled weakly at that. Camille always knew the right thing to say. But here, surrounded by people who had known her during the most vulnerable, fragile years of her youth, being seen felt much more like an imminent threat than a beautiful gift. Why did she even come in the first place? That is the real question worth sitting with. Why would a woman who had survived exclusion, quiet humiliation, and the very specific, isolated cruelty of being the only black girl in a tight circle of incredibly wealthy white classmates willingly choose to walk right back into that lion's den? Some onlookers would say it was simple pride. Others might assume she wanted to desperately prove something to them. The raw truth, if Naomi were being entirely honest with herself, was much softer and far sadder than either of those answers. She came because a small, incredibly stubborn part of her soul still believed that people could change over time. That maybe, just maybe, Vanessa had grown up. That maybe the sharp cruelty she remembered from college was merely exaggerated by time and her own old insecurities. That hopeful part of her was about to be brutally corrected. Across the expansive ballroom, standing near the floor-length windows, was Vanessa Whitmore. If you were casting a Hollywood film about unearned privilege, you would cast someone who looked exactly like Vanessa. She was blonde, heavily polished, and wore the kind of effortless confidence that comes not from true depth of character, but from never once in her entire life being made to feel like she didn't belong somewhere. She had married incredibly well, a prominent surgeon named Philip who was currently accepting a glass of champagne from a passing tray, nodding along to a conversation he clearly wasn't listening to. Vanessa had the specific, radiant glow of a woman who had decided very early in life that being important was the exact same thing as being good. She noticed Naomi the very moment she walked in. Of course she did. "Oh my God," Vanessa murmured, turning her body slightly toward Chloe and Madison, her two closest, loyal satellites. These were the women who had spent 4 straight years of college laughing at whatever Vanessa laughed at and frowning at whatever Vanessa frowned at. Naomi actually came. Chloe looked over, her eyes narrowing. Naomi Bennett, seriously? Alone, by the looks of it. Vanessa's smile was the precise kind that never reached the eyes. It lived strictly on the lips, a cold, decorative feature rather than a genuine emotional one. "Give me a few minutes." Madison, who had always been the most perceptive of the three and therefore by far the most dangerous, tilted her champagne glass slightly. "Be nice, Vanessa." "I'm always nice," Vanessa said, already gliding across the floor. She was not always nice. Back near the drinks table, Naomi felt it long before she ever heard it. It was that particular, uncomfortable shift in social energy that happens when someone is approaching you with absolute intention. She looked up calmly from her phone, and there they were, all three of them, moving toward her in the synchronized, unhurried way of women who had never had to rush for a single thing in their entire lives. Naomi's stomach dropped quietly, but she refused to show it. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and smiled perfectly. "Naomi." Vanessa opened her arms wide, acting as if they were old, dear friends reuniting after years of genuine warmth. The hug she delivered was brief and entirely performative, the kind that loudly communicates I'm demonstrating affection rather than actually feeling a single ounce of it. "I cannot believe you're here. You look. Wow, look at you." "Good to see you, Vanessa," Naomi said. Her voice was remarkably steady, which in itself was a massive, victorious milestone. "It's been forever," Chloe chimed in, caressing her own cheek lightly. "You haven't changed at all." "Thank you." Naomi wasn't entirely sure that was a compliment coming from them, but she accepted it with grace anyway. They settled into the uncomfortable, rigid choreography of forced small talk. Naomi noticed, with the quiet awareness of someone who had spent years carefully reading rooms, that the passive-aggressive questions began almost immediately. Softly at first, entirely conversationally, the exact way a sharp knife enters slowly before you ever even feel the cut. "So, what are you doing now?" Vanessa asked, swirling her glass. "Architecture and interior design," Naomi replied calmly. "I run my own firm here." "Oh, that's lovely." Vanessa's response was warm, but entirely hollow, like expensive wrapping paper wrapped tightly around an empty box. "Are you still in Atlanta?" "Yes, I've been back here about 4 years now." "Wonderful." A brief, heavy pause followed. Then came the real strike. "And, are you married?" And there it was. The question landed the exact way those malicious questions always land, with a sweet smile attached to it, which somehow makes it infinitely worse. Because the smile gives the toxic asker complete plausible deniability. It cleverly transforms a probing interrogation into a pleasantry. It means that if you flinch, if your jaw tightens, or if your eyes dim even slightly, you are the one being labeled oversensitive. You're the one who made the moment awkward. But Naomi had spent a decade learning to absorb that exact kind of social warfare without ever showing the impact. "Not yet," she said simply, reaching down for her champagne glass and taking a slow, unbothered sip. "Oh." Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted just enough. Not dramatically, just enough to signal pity. "Kids?" "No." Another pause followed, much longer this time, the kind of heavy silence that is itself a loud, judgmental comment. Chloe said softly, tilting her head the exact way people do when they're performing sympathy rather than feeling it, "So, you're just focusing on the career thing." "I thoroughly enjoy my work," Naomi stated firmly. Of course, of course." Madison nodded slowly, watching her. "It's just, at our age, most people have kind of figured that part out, you know? The personal side." Naomi said absolutely nothing. She understood exactly what was happening. She had experienced this particular, veiled brand of high society cruelty enough times to recognize its architecture instantly. It was never loud. It never announced itself. It operated entirely through subtle implication and ugly suggestion, through the careful arrangement of innocent-sounding words into a weapon that cut deep while leaving no visible mark. These women had perfected it over years of relentless country club practice, sharpening it the way some people sharpen a professional skill they are proud of. Why did they hate her so much? That question had lived quietly in the back of Naomi's mind for an entire decade, persistent, like a song you can't fully remember but can't entirely forget either. What had she ever done to them, really, except exist boldly in spaces where they never expected her to be? Except earn a prestigious, full academic scholarship to an elite school they had simply paid their way into? Except refuse to shrink herself into something easier for them to ignore? Maybe that was more than enough. Maybe that had always been enough to offend them. Vanessa glanced around the room casually, then looked back at Naomi with an expression that was almost thoughtful. You know, honestly, I always thought you intimidated men a little bit back in school. You had this intense energy, like you didn't really need anyone. Naomi kept her face completely still, refusing to give them a reaction. Chloe eagerly agreed, like, laser-focused. Always studying, always working. I remember thinking, when does this girl breathe? Men don't always respond well to that, Madison added smoothly. And then, as if she were offering genuine, heartfelt wisdom, as if she were a deeply generous person sharing something helpful, it's not a criticism, Naomi. It's just, men fundamentally want to feel needed. You always seemed entirely too self-sufficient. The words were wrapped beautifully in false concern. The delivery was sisterly, almost tender. If you were passing by the table and caught only tiny fragments of the conversation, you might have genuinely thought these were loving women giving their dear friend honest, caring feedback. You would have had absolutely no idea that every single sentence was a small, precise, calculated humiliation. It was delivered with the absolute confidence of women who had never once in their lives been held accountable for the psychological damage they caused. Naomi felt a burning heat rise behind her eyes. She blinked it back instantly. Maybe, she said lightly. Her voice was absolutely remarkable in that moment. Because on the outside, she sounded entirely unbothered, almost quietly amused. But on the inside, she was that vulnerable 18-year-old girl again, the one who had shown up to freshman year bright-eyed, hopeful, and entirely on her own merits, only to spend 4 years being consistently, invisibly diminished by the exact same girls now standing in front of her in designer dresses. She had been so certain that time would change things. She had been so devastatingly wrong. And then, things got significantly worse. Because the universe, apparently, had decided that a random Wednesday evening in Atlanta was the absolute perfect moment to deliver every single form of emotional humiliation in rapid succession. She felt the heavy shift in the room before she ever fully processed the physical reason for it. A completely different kind of sharp attention was moving through the wealthy crowd, turning heads rapidly near the main entrance. And then she heard it, his voice. Familiar, highly practiced, and carrying that slightly too loud warmth of a man who had learned to perform charm at every single social occasion. It was Daniel. He walked into the ballroom wearing a sharp charcoal blazer and the easy, unearned confidence of someone who had never once in his life doubted his own welcome anywhere. He was handsome in an unremarkable, safe way, the specific kind of handsome that photographs well for social media but doesn't actually linger in the mind. On his arm was a woman. She was tall, fair-skinned, with straight auburn hair and a striking smile that had clearly never encountered an orthodontic problem it couldn't conquer. She was radiant in that effortless, wealthy way that made other women simultaneously admire her while feeling slightly worse about themselves. Naomi's stomach turned over quietly, once, like a heavy page in a tragic book she had already read and never wanted to revisit. Daniel's eyes found her almost immediately. People's eyes always seamlessly find the exact person they are trying desperately not to look for. Naomi. He said her name like a sudden surprise he wasn't entirely sure how to categorize. Wow. Hey, Daniel. She smiled calmly. She was astonishing even herself with her own absolute composure tonight. "This is Sloane," Daniel said, gesturing proudly to the stunning woman beside him. Sloane extended her hand with the gracious, unbothered confidence of someone who had never felt threatened by another human being in her entire life. "My fiancé." "Congratulations," Naomi said, shaking her hand firmly. Sloane's eyes did a quick, almost imperceptible sweep of Naomi's entire body, the brutal kind of assessment women expertly perform in under 2 seconds and never openly acknowledge. Then, she smiled warmly. "Oh, you two know each other from school? That's so sweet. Did you date?" The question was direct, and seemingly innocent. The cruelest questions in life usually are. Briefly, Daniel said, utilizing the specific, dismissive casualness of a man trying to minimize something that had actually been incredibly intense and not casual at all. "Small world," Sloane said pleasantly, and then she naturally turned her full attention right back to Daniel, like a flower turning towards sunlight. And just like that, Naomi completely ceased to exist in that particular orbit. She stood there frozen for exactly 4 more agonizing seconds. And then, she calmly put her champagne glass down on the table, smiled politely at no one in particular, and walked toward the restroom with the slow, deliberate dignity of a woman utterly determined not to let them see a single scratch. She made it safely inside before the very first tear fell. The bathroom was mercifully empty. Naomi stood trembling at the sink, both hands gripping the cool, white marble edge, and stared directly at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was still absolutely perfect. Isn't that always the cruelest detail of grief? That you can look completely fine on the outside while something old, ragged, and broken is tearing quietly inside your chest. Why did she come? Why had she willingly put herself through this torture? What exactly had she been trying to prove, and to whom? The painful flashbacks came the way they always did, unbidden, sharp, arriving in fragmented memories. The cold dormitory hallway where she had accidentally overheard Vanessa describing her to a crowd as that basic scholarship girl who always looks like she's trying way too hard. The toxic group projects where they divided tasks and quietly gave Naomi the absolute most work while ensuring she received the least credit. The wild weekend parties she was never invited to, not once in 4 long years, while her white roommate, who was unremarkable and ordinary in every measurable way, received invitations regularly. The devastating way Daniel had eventually stopped walking her to class because, as he had explained gently and terribly, it was making things too complicated with his elite friend group. But she had survived all of it. She had built a stunning career from absolutely nothing, a prestigious design firm from scratch, and a life that she was genuinely proud of when she was not standing in this specific ballroom, in this city, in this terrible constellation of old wounds. But survival, she thought, gripping the marble edge tighter, wasn't the same thing as true healing. She grabbed a clean tissue, pressed it carefully beneath each eye, and took one long, grounding breath. She was leaving. She was going to walk right out of this bathroom, cross that toxic ballroom with her head held high, collect her coat, and go straight home to her beautiful apartment and her good life. She would never, under any circumstances, attend another reunion as long as she lived. She pushed the heavy bathroom door open. And that is exactly when she heard it, the particular, sudden electricity that moves through a massive crowd when something entirely unexpected and vastly significant has just arrived. The energy in the ballroom had changed completely. Naomi felt at the exact moment she stepped out into the corridor, that unmistakable shift in atmospheric pressure that happens right before a massive storm, when the air goes completely still, the temperature drops, and every living thing pauses without quite knowing why. Conversations had lowered to an absolute whisper. Heads were turning in unison toward the entrance. Somewhere near the front of the room, a hotel staff member was speaking rapidly and frantically into an earpiece, his posture suddenly turning rigid with the particular anxiety of someone who had not been adequately prepared for whatever was currently unfolding outside. Naomi paused near the edge of the room, her coat still uncollected. Her plan to disappear quietly was suddenly interrupted by the simple human instinct to understand what everyone else was staring at. "Who is that?" someone near her urgently murmured. "I heard it's a massive Korean businessman," a man in a navy suit replied, craning his neck wildly. Something about him owning the entire hotel chain. He owns this hotel? He owns several globally, I think. Someone just said his conglomerate acquired, but whatever his company had just acquired was lost beneath the sudden, massive ripple of whispers that moved through the crowd like a current. It gathered speed and immense volume as it traveled from the entrance inward, passing through clusters of classmates who had, moments ago, been smugly discussing mortgages, elite schools, and who had gained weight since graduation. Now, every single one of them was looking toward the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom. Naomi truly should have left right then. She knows that now. Instead, she stood frozen at the very edge of the room, one hand resting lightly on the back of a vacant chair, and watched. The doors flew open, and Kang Junwoo walked in. There is a particular, rare quality that certain elite people possess, a powerful, gravitational presence. It is something that has absolutely nothing to do with height or physical beauty alone, though he possessed both in abundance. It is something much harder to name, the distinct way a room naturally reorganizes itself around a person without ever being asked, the way human attention flows toward them completely involuntarily. Junwoo had this quality in a way that was almost unsettling because it was entirely effortless. He was not performing a single thing for the crowd. He was simply walking, and the room was simply responding, and he seemed entirely indifferent to both. He was wearing a flawless black suit that was clearly not bought from anywhere with a recognizable storefront. It was fitted in the particular way that only elite, bespoke tailoring achieves, the kind of quiet luxury suit that whispers power rather than loudly announcing it. His posture was straight without being rigid. His expression was perfectly composed, not cold exactly, but sealed shut, like a room with no windows, telling the onlookers absolutely nothing about what was happening inside his mind. Two large, quiet security personnel followed at a measured distance behind him, looking sharp and careful the way trained professionals always do. He looked like a man who had never once in his entire life stood lonely near a drinks table, checking his phone just to look busy. Vanessa noticed him from across the room, and Naomi watched from a distance as a pathetic transformation happened. Vanessa adjusted her posture instantly, touching her hair once briefly before stopping herself. She leaned toward Chloe, her eyes going wide, as they began doing that desperate thing women do when they've spotted someone worth impressing. The hotel's general manager had materialized from nowhere, moving toward Junwoo with rapid, desperate energy. Junwoo shook his hand briefly, completely unbothered. And this was the exact moment that the entire room would talk about for the rest of their lives, he stopped listening to the manager entirely. His sharp eyes had found something across the room. He was looking with intense focus right past the crowd, right past Vanessa, right past Daniel. He was looking directly at Naomi. Naomi glanced over her shoulder instinctively, assuming there must be someone important behind her. There was no one, just a decorative vase of white flowers against the wall. She looked back, and he was already moving directly toward her. The wealthy crowd parted like the Red Sea without even being asked. He walked straight past the general manager mid-sentence, straight past Vanessa who had strategically positioned herself in his path, and straight toward the edge of the room. Straight toward Naomi. He stopped directly in front of her. Up close, she could see a burning, intense warmth in his eyes that completely contradicted his cold, severe composure. It was like a fire visible through a narrow window of a dark building. He looked at her as if verifying she was real. And then softly, so softly that the words were really only meant for her, though the dead silence of the ballroom allowed several shocked onlookers to hear anyway, he spoke. "Baby," he said quietly, his hand coming to rest gently, naturally at her waist, remembering exactly where it belonged. "There you are. You stopped replying to me." The entire ballroom went completely silent as Naomi's lips parted in sheer, unadulterated shock, realizing she had never seen this billionaire before in her entire life. What an unforgettable turn of events. Naomi was completely ready to walk out of that ballroom and close the door on her past forever, only for the world to flip on its head the moment Kang Junwoo stepped through those doors. But the mystery is only just beginning. How does this billionaire know her name, her business, and her exact college history when she has absolutely no memory of him? And how will Vanessa and Daniel handle the absolute shock of seeing the woman they tried to make feel invisible suddenly become the center of attention? We are diving straight into those answers in the very next episode, so you definitely do not want to miss out. If you are on the edge of your seat and can't wait to see Naomi's ultimate vindication unfold, make sure to hit that like button right now. It really helps our channel grow and allows these stories to reach more people who need a reminder of their own worth. Share this video with your friends, your family, or anyone else who loves a powerful story of sweet justice and unexpected romance. Don't forget to drop a comment below with your theories. How do you think Naomi and Junwoo are connected? We read every single thought you share. Most importantly, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications by hitting that bell icon. That way, you will be the absolute first to know the exact moment Chapter 2 drops. Trust me, the next chapter takes the drama, the payback, and the mystery to an entirely new level. Thank you so much for watching, keep holding your head high, and we will see you in the next episode.